Hello viewers, welcome to this episode of the Youth Roundtable. And in the spirit of Pan-Africanism, I said to you, Karibuni, welcome to this episode again, where we focus on discussing the African Youth Day, which is commemorated this particular Wednesday, the 1st of November, every single year, is dedicated to discuss, the milestones, challenges, gains, and setbacks of the African young person. So this particular year, it is known that the challenges that, that have been recurring still continue to exist, unemployment, among other issues that young people face. And to put all this into perspective, this afternoon is a panel of distinguished young people, carefully selected to, dissect this conversation. And I shall introduce them to you, and in no particular order. Next to myself is Kato Laban. Laban is a graduate of economics from Makerere University, and also a youth leader from Kawempe Division, and a member of the National Youth Council. Laban, we are very happy to have you. Good afternoon.
It's a great pleasure to be here, Comrade Moses Kidega, for this discussion.
We are very happy to have you as well. Next to Laban is a YALI alumni, but also straight from WE Talk series, Uganda. Is that correct?
We Talk series, Uganda.
We Talk series, yes, yeah, Uganda. Winnie, Akidi, Adile is the name. Winnie is, has done so much work around diplomacy and governance, and we are very happy to tap into her knowledge and experience this afternoon. Winnie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting me today.
How do you feel?
Great. It's the Africa Youth Day, so literally it's a day for us as young people to have to be vibrant. So
except me and him, the two of you have tried to embrace the African, attire. So Laban, we are disappointed today.
No, the represented both sides of
The new scrap of
disappointed.
No, let's just say we're representing both aspects of the young people.
I know. Yes, the last but not least is a lawyer, counsel Julius Bwesigye.
Julius Arineitwe,
Bwesigye. Yes, Julius is a lawyer and also a master's student of law at Makerere University. We believe he brings, expert knowledge on issues around international law and diplomacy, but also around, the possibility of Africa as a continent. Julius, we're very happy to have you.
Yeah, Mr. Daniel and all the colleagues here. It's a particular honor to be here. And good morning to you, the viewers and followers.
All right, thank you. Since you have the microphone, Julius, let's just begin right away. And I'll ask a general question. What does the African Youth Day mean to you? Does it mean anything?
That's a unique question. But when you talk about the youth, quite a number of things, just like the way we talk about people with disabilities, the way we talk about, it's a special needs group.
Yeah.
And my entry point to this should be the African Youth Charter that we talked about just a few minutes back. And this charter, adopted in 2006, has quite a number of beautiful provisions and obligations on all the member states that the youth shall not be discriminated. The youth shall have the freedom of expression, that the youth shall have the freedom of association. They will own property, and even if I pause from there, then you ask yourself what the African Youth Day should be. It should then be a celebration of the extent to which we have achieved that. That the African youth is liberated as far as property ownership is concerned. That the African youth has the freedom to associate, that the African youth has the freedom to express himself or herself, that the African youth, above all, is not discriminated. So what do the figures say? So we look at our Uganda Bureau of Statistics.
Yeah.
So we have 70% of Uganda's 45 million people, youth. Okay? We have 65.5% of these youth unemployed. What's the tacit implication of this? That every time you get 100 youths on the streets of Kampala, you have 65, around 65 of
Close
them
to 70.
without a job.
Leave alone the ones who are employed but not meaningfully employed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So then that brings my entry point into the question beforehand. What must we be celebrating? Should we be celebrating the victories, or should we be uniting together to make one voice that, hey, respect our lives? The critical question for us to ask ourselves is what does the African Youth Charter mean to the youth today, and to what extent have our governments in Africa maybe honored this particular charter, and what's the situation on the ground? So I had highlighted on the issue of property rights and the economic welfare of the youth that we have in the country. If we have stated that 65.5% of the youths that we have in Uganda, for example, I hadn't cross-checked what the situation is in the rest of the Great Lakes region, that such a proportion is unemployed, the obvious implication is that these people are poor. If you don't have a job, if you have not had a great inheritance from your parents, chances are high that despite the level of your education, if you have no meaningful income, perhaps you have not started your own business because you don't have startup capital, and most likely by deductive reasoning, you are likely to be very poor. Okay? So you look at the notion of discrimination. Now, discrimination, that's around Article 2 of the African Youth Charter, that the youth shall not be discriminated. And we look at discrimination in quite a number of paradigms. We look at political participation. We look at issues to do with policy making. We look at issues to do with gender. We look at issues to do with employment still. And you know what's happening in the Great Lakes region? We have political patronage as the guiding principle as far as opportunities are concerned. You must be having a godfather somewhere for you to access a job. You must not be employed because you are skilled, because you have the highest level of education, because you have exhibited talent and ability, but you must be employed simply because your father fought in a war somewhere 30 years back. You must be employed simply because perhaps your uncle sits in a particular office somewhere. And that means a vast majority who, by the way, on merit, should be taking it, are left out. And that's a failure. It's not right. So then I can't even discuss that, because in law they say facts speak for themselves. Even people that are following us know what exactly is on the ground as far as we are concerned in the great. And by the way, this cuts across. It's not for Uganda alone. Even in Kenya, even in Tanzania, even in Rwanda, the issue of discrimination is cutting across. So when you look at freedom of association and expression, these are two distinct provisions, but I always prefer looking at them in unison. So what's the situation on the ground? Are youth able to speak out with liberty? You could say, yes, in affirmation, maybe when you're in civic space here, because this perhaps is a safe space. But what happens when you walk out? you walk out to a highly restricted social environment. What you post on your Twitter handle might determine the opportunities that come your way. How you manage your Facebook account will manage the degree of discrimination that you might encounter in the next phase of your life. Okay? So in that line, if you look at political participation, if you look at, because you see the youth, so they will ask you, which political party do you belong to? Are you able to speak out in that political party? What is your social movement? What do you do there? And ordinarily, conventionally, the youth have always been at the forefront of transformation of economies. And for these youths, right from the days of Mr. Yoweri Museveni, when he was still a young man at Ntale, at the University of Dar es Salaam, and the University Students' Revolutionary Front, these people were offered a conducive environment to speak out. And we must take notice that even in the previous governments, the governments of Obote, the governments of Amin, even when rights were violated, the rights for university students to speak out and to gather in their social movements and stand for particular ideologies, such rights remained respected by those previous governments.
Okay, that is quite subjective, because I'm sure you'd like to listen to the story of Olaro Tuno and how he fled Lumumba Hall on the premise of being persecuted by the government. But I hear you, fair enough. And I want to bring in Winnie. Winnie, you've heard the way Julius has put out his points. He tries to strike a balance, but he leans more towards there is not so much to celebrate. I don't know. What do you think of the African Youth Day? Is it worthy celebration?
It's a very hard spot to come in after your submission, but definitely, yeah. So it's really worthy enough to celebrate African Youth Day, because if we are to literally look back from how the different programming started up in line with what youths do across the globe, realize that young people have really been so much left out. And when it comes to spaces and opportunities where the voices have to be heard. And I would also want to really say that given the perspective that is shared of the African Youth Charter, there's a lot of documentation that protects the young people, that speaks about involving the young people, promoting them, investing them. But then we as the young people, the fact that we are not actively engaged in such platforms where our voices should be heard or given the opportunities for us to speak, makes it really hard for us to openly celebrate this day. But then in the context where he shared something around governance, politics, and more of unemployment, I just want to definitely speak about the young people in the perspective of health and education and more of entrepreneurship. Because you see, just as you said, 65% of Uganda's population is young people. You also realize that in that 65%, you realize that close to the 90 of that 65 are children also. So you realize that the young people who are not towards the age of 18 are actually more than the actual youth in this country.
Just for clarity, is that 75% of the 45 million Ugandans are below 35 years of age. But in that percentage, only 21% of that 75% are between the age of 18 and 35. The rest are children.
The rest are children.
Yeah, just for context.
That's it. Now that gives you an upper hand on why we need to celebrate this day as young people, as the African youths, because it's really quite challenging given the fact that when it comes to investing in young people's health, you see there's a lot of teenage pregnancies, child marriages that are happening, and there's a lot of child mortality rates that are happening, as well as young people dying during giving birth. But then that is something that really gives an eye-opener to people who fund youth programs in terms of health. And also the fact that young people are openly speaking about their rights, their needs in terms of investing in their needs as young people's health. But then you realize that however much young people are really so much speaking about this, there's no accountability. Like there's no straight, streamlined line for accountability where these young people openly come up and then hold their governments and their citizens accountable. But nonetheless, however much it's a negative perspective, there's also some bit of context in terms of a milestone reached when it comes to promoting their health. Even the fact that young people have now taken the battle to speak up. That's why when he spoke of when you go to Twitter, you go to Facebook, it determines who is going to see, it determines the job that you're going to get. Now that gives you the upper hand on how the young people are now taking up these spaces by force to utilize the digital media platforms to openly speak up about these issues around the health, issues around political confrontations that they're actually caught up in between, issues around the loopholes in education. But then, however much they're speaking this, they are not given these physical platforms where, like for example, as Winnie right now, I can't just get up and walk into State House to state my issue. But when I go through a social media platform and just put up a tweet or design my social media platform in a way that I speak about these issues and also tag those offices, like those mainstream offices that work in relation to these issues, my voice is heard. So now, given the challenges that they go through to ensure that their voice is heard, it's really important and candid enough for them to celebrate this day. Now, this day gives it more of like, given the hurdles and the challenges they go through to reach, this is a day that gives them an opportunity to at least celebrate the mileages that they've reached. Because in today's society, it's really hard for an African youth to compete with a young person who is outside the context of the African continent, given the opportunities that are available to them against the opportunities that young people get here. And that takes you back to the education system when it comes to Africa and then Uganda in particular. Our system here doesn't really give you that much of an opportunity for you to choose straight from, let's say, the moment you join high school. You'll go through 8 subjects, 10 subjects, and then in the long run, at the end of your senior 6, you literally don't even know what you want to do. But then when it comes to the levels of employment out there, you're expected to go to campus, go through a whole lecture, like 3, 4, 2 years of being taught, and then you're not given on the hands-on technical skills that will prepare you to come out to the job market. Now, here you are in today's environment where, as he said, you have to have the godfather. If you don't have the godfather, you have to have a social platform that you have branded yourself in. And then the fact that you're also branding yourself online, most of these jobs are actually in competitions with young people who are out of the spheres of Africa, who've been well equipped to handle these things like technically and also have the more influence. So the fact that it's really a very big challenge for young people, for young people's voices to be heard, for the platforms to be given to them, and the fact that they're the most oppressed and they're the ones who are always caught up in the line of confrontations when it comes to elections, campaigns, when it comes to the loopholes in education, when it comes to like literally every issue in this country, young people are always there. So this is just a day for us to genuinely pat ourselves in the back and celebrate us being young, being youthful, and also the different things we've done. Like it's really good to just pat ourselves in the back and say, yes, however much it's challenging, at least we've tried to do something. And there is some bit of change, because honestly, there is change. When it comes to the health sector, there is change. The youth are fighting for the teenagers below 18, because the older generation are all saying the youths and the teenagers are corrupted by the digital age. But not forgetting that the world is going digital, and there's that generational gap where our youth today and the teenagers have to find a way that they fit in and be able to use these platforms positively. And now the fact that the youth currently need to use that to ensure that they protect the teenagers and leverage on the opportunities, and all this holistic kind of engaging with all these genres there, our elders, and then the elders in the other countries, the teenagers, like it's just an opportunity for us to just be happy and celebrate our win.
I hear you that amidst the difficult times, there is one or two things to say kudos on this particular point. And I agree with you, because if we don't keep on giving ourselves that extra hope that keeps us going one day at a time, then we'll find ourselves either giving up along the way or, abandoning our cause. But Laban, I want to bring you in, and you've had the two colleagues here. Winnie, and we shall get deeper into their submissions, but Winnie attempts to be, she's neither here nor there. But she leans more towards saying that, well, amidst all these challenges, there is something to take back home, all right? Whereas Julius, he thinks the contrary to that. So, I don't know. The African Youth Day is here. Are there gains and challenges? So, what are the gains that you think are there for us to take home, but also what are the unique challenges?
Thank you, moderator. Sometimes it's a challenge when you speak after the seniors, but because if I assume the majority of you have been in these spaces, I may say I'm a kadogo here, but I'm a kadogo here, but nevertheless, I will try to mingle the discussion. First of all, before I give my submission, I want to first congratulate the springboks of the South African rugby national team. Surely a majority of those young men are our age. And as we celebrate the African Youth Day, I want to take this opportunity to congratulate them as a Pan-African.
Sure.
Winning the Rugby World Cup for the first time in history. No any other team has ever won. Remember, they were tying with New Zealand. The Black. So it was, I watched the match, and I'm very sure also you're a follower.
I enjoy it.
Having passed through the school that promotes rugby in Uganda,
sure,
you must be a good supporter of rugby.
I followed keenly.
Yeah, so I watched it, and I was so impressed looking at Ramaphosa attending the event in Paris. It was really remarkable and legendary. So I want to congratulate those young men of South Africa. It's a great pleasure to be here to discuss mainly the African Youth Day, and that we commemorate every 1st November. In 2006, in Gambia's capital city, Bangui, the African member states made a resolution through, I call it the political, legal document called the African Youth Charter, which acts as a strategic framework in looking at the empowerment, development of the African young people, the youth, both at continental, national, and local. So, when we come here to talk about the African Youth Day, it's a great opportunity to look at the achievements the African young people have played, both at the independence, the post, and today. It's a day that we have to look at the laws and the contribution that the young people have done on the African continent in various states. It's a day that we have to look at the challenges the African youth faced in the past, what they face today, and what we are likely to face in the future. If today we are celebrating the African Youth Day, mostly here in Uganda, it will be celebrated at Sheraton Hotel and across the country. We are celebrating, but it's a great opportunity that we are here. You may not be able to to access different events. But civic space gives the opportunity to young people to have a discussion on the roles and contributions played by young people in Africa. Mostly as a student or as a scholar of commerce, economics, I will start in that perspective. As we celebrate the African Youth Day, recently I read the United Nations Conference report on trade and development. While I was reading that report, I noted that African countries, or the African continent trade with Europe stands at 27.75%. Then African continent with Asia in terms of trading stands at 32.5%. But African countries themselves in terms of trading, it stands at 18%.
Within themselves.
Within themselves. So as we celebrate the African Youth Day, it is the opportunity for us to look at what is the real problem. Why is it that trade within African continent, within the African member states, is still low, is historically very low compared to the outside world? Why? And it is through that we have to come up and we embrace.
And maybe you could tell us that even that trade between Africa and, say, Asia, most of it is not balanced. We are importing.
Yeah, that is, yes. I'm looking at both exports and it is all combined. The percentage are combined on exports and imports. So, it is the day that we have to come and have discussions, embrace the 2018 initiative that aims to promote trade across the African continent. And that is the African Continental Free Trade Area. That I believe that it is the only way to go for African continent. In terms of economic integration, in terms of having the single common market, in terms of having free movement of goods and services across Africa. And that is what we have to look at as the young people. Recently, while I was looking at the current transport prices, freight prices, I noted that someone traveling from Entebbe to Cairo International Airport is more expensive than someone who is traveling from UK, London, to Cairo.
In Egypt.
Yes. If today you are traveling to Senegal's capital, Dakar, is more expensive than someone who is traveling from UK to Dakar. This is the discussion that we should have today as we celebrate the African Youth Day. It is the day that we have to come and discuss the new scramble for Africa. The hydro-politics surrounding the African continent, you know it, between the River Nile, Egypt,
Nile Basin.
Yes. The Egypt, Sudan, whatever is happening there, the hydro-geopolitics surrounding there. It is the time that we have to come here and discuss the issues of climate change and environmental sustainability. Because in the near future, most of the young people will not have where to sleep, where to get shelter from. Because the issues of climate change are very, very serious. I am glad she talked about the issue of healthcare systems in the African continent. What you see here in Uganda is not different across the African countries. We have to look at how do we advocate for initiatives started by the African continent.
I don't know. Just hold you right there, because speaking of health, we have the Abuja Declaration, where African member states agreed that they will allocate 15% of their national budget to the healthcare. So I think the legislation is actually there. What is lacking is the political will
and the implementation. And that is what I'm talking about. That just look at the initiative which were established by the African Union. And look at how do we enforce, because the onus on us. You are not expecting someone of 60s start advocating for the youth of 20s. It is very hard. So it is upon us to make sure that how do we look at the initiative aimed at stopping the huge spread of HIV in Africa. It is our time to come up and support like the initiative of Africa Bingwa. You know that initiative that looks at empowering or calling upon the young people to vaccinate, because you remember what happened in the era of COVID-19. Then the issue of employment.
Just hold it right there. I want to bring in Julius because you've triggered something on my mind. And Julius, Kato is trying to elevate the discussion and saying that we shouldn't look at the African Youth Day in the sense of only particular factors, but let us elevate it to discuss about a possible future for Africa. And there really speaks of the possibility of trade. Because Africa is a highly indebted continent. I don't know, if you summed up our debt as a continent that we have owing to either World Bank or IMF or any other country, I'm sure it is mind-blowing. You look at Africa today is grappling with conflict, peace and security, all right? Africa, so many states have become ungovernable. You look at Somalia, grappling with Al-Shabaab. You look at DRC Congo in conflict. You look at both South and North Sudan. You look at this country, just above Somalia, is it?
Djibouti?
No.
Eritrea.
Where MK made certain comments. Which country is that? Anyway, but the issue is that Ethiopia. The issue is that peace and conflict continues to remain a big hindrance towards Africa's progress. Because I don't think that the African continental free trade area can thrive in an unstable continent. So, just broadly speaking, what are the broader issues that young people should begin to talk about at continental level?
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Kato, and all the colleagues for all your inputs. I must mention that you're giving the debate a great boost. At the center of every question lies the central pin. There is what they call the central pin, and some people choose to call it the Jesus bolt. Do you see an airplane, a helicopter, that is hovering over the space? It is managed by one pin. It's called Jesus bolt. This pin connects the entire wagon in space to its propellers, these that rotate above it. It is a singular pin. Once affected, the entire helicopter will crash. No matter the speed, no matter the engineering, no matter what, that singular bolt. Why am I alluding to this bolt? I am comparing this bolt to the manner in which Africa is governed. And all the policies that affect the broad perspectives that my colleagues have brought into the debate are premised on one question, the political question. And I understand that people out there don't cherish debates that are a bit political. But I must mention this morning that politics remain the heart, the nerve, and the center of whatever happens at a family level, community level, national level, and later on at an international level. at the center of a mismanaged environment lies a political question that he sort of avoids talking about. I understand.
I was coming
quite
to that,
a
but
number
the
of
moderator
youths
stopped me
today
there.
don't like
But I talked about the
debunking
scramble for Africa.
quite a number of youths today lack the courage, and that should form part of the debate, the discourse that we are talking about. Individual charisma to approach the questions that affect an individual, whether a youth or an adult or a young person. Do you have the charisma, the requisite charisma, to face the questions that are before you? That's the key thing. And that's critical itself at a personal level. But if you look at the international level, like you have asked, I wouldn't like to digress so much. I want to offer you an example of the double taxation trade agreement. They are called DTTA. So you have, for example, one that we have between Uganda and Netherlands. This is an agreement that was negotiated by the government of Uganda through the Ministry of Finance and the Embassy of Netherlands. So they sit together, they agree on double taxation. After that, we have several other corporations. So under this agreement are tax holidays, exemptions, okay? So you have goods from Netherlands come into Uganda and they are tax-free. These are goods worth trillions and trillions of money. You have Uganda on the other side taking goods to Netherlands by reciprocal relationship under the agreement. Uganda is taking beans of Robusta coffee. These are beans in their primary stage. They have not been processed at all to improve their value. These beans are worth around 1 billion. Netherlands in return is bringing in things that are worth trillions. And the problem is exacerbated by a situation where we have now these multilateral corporations. So you have Total that comes from France, but it has registered a company in Netherlands. Upon discovery that there is a gentleman's agreement between Uganda and Netherlands, whose terms are improperly negotiated. So a company that is birthed from France, registered in Netherlands, shifts its headquarters to Netherlands, and begins directly shipping goods to Uganda that are tax exempt.
Because they are aware of that.
Exactly. And once profits are siphoned, I call it, because he brought in a fertile notion of scramble and partition of Africa.
They knew.
In the 15th, 12th, and 13th centuries, they grabbed our land directly, and cotton and coffee directly, and took the same into their industries and processed goods, and took our fathers and grandfathers into slavery. Today, they are siphoning, the most nutritious ingredients of Africa, and they are doing so in a manner that we can hardly understand. They are using our weak political structures. They are using our inept, I wouldn't prefer using inept, maybe I should have a duty to be soft. They are using our morally corrupt leaders. They offer them kintu kidogo, and then they take gold and silver in return. So you have a minister of finance, you have a permanent secretary in a ministry, you have someone in a particular office, they come and offer him a gift of a vehicle, a brand new Land Cruiser. And once the Land Cruiser is given to him, he signs on a what? An agreement that binds your children and their great-children. And this is how Africa is losing illicit financial flows from Africa in form of taxes. I'm just using taxation, double taxation trade agreements as a piece of an iceberg. But the problem is exacerbated by our poor political regimes, our poor human rights records, where the young people have been denied jobs on merit. They train in Uganda using our national resources here in Uganda, our teachers, our school facilities, and they must run away from Uganda to go to work in Europe, to go to work in the Middle East, as they are called kadongos, kadamas. These are skilled young people, our colleagues, the youth that should be here at the center of policy making, at the center of governance. But they are running away from the country because our country's systems, our infrastructure capability is not structured in a manner that is enabling talent to flourish. That's the political question doctrine that I'm talking about. She talks about health. Yesterday, I saw a headline in the New Vision that Mulago Women's Hospital is beginning to offer a few rewards to the vulnerable people that go there. And in fact, that was my post yesterday. I took a screenshot and I posted it, and I asked if there are quite a number of many vulnerable people at Mulago Neonatal Hospital as opposed to Kawempe, where a vast majority of our parents from Waise, from Chiflu, from Kawempe, from where are gathering to give birth. So if you are at the center of policy framework, where is it that is deserving most? Neonatal Mulago or Kawempe Hospital? Chirudu Hospital or Nakaselo Hospital? These are questions that require not space science, but common sense. But it looks like our leaders, and I have the duty to respect them, and I do as such, but it looks like they have knowledge and they have deliberately refused to utilize that particular knowledge to the benefit of the youth and the country at large. This is something that is self-evident. So you cannot ask what the role of Africa is at an international stage without tackling questions of governance.
So, in a nutshell, the political question and governance issue must be answered first for us to be able to flourish in terms of economic empowerment, in terms of all these other things that we mentioned earlier on, right?
In precise terms, that's my position.
We are due for a short commercial break. Laban, I see you're itching to say something, but I will begin from you. We are due for a short commercial break, and to the viewers, just don't move a muscle, because before you know it, we shall be back with the second phase. See you.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
We'll be back from that short commercial break. Well, without further ado, we shall just pick it up from where we stopped. Laban, before we went for the break, I saw you itching to say something.
Yeah, what mostly I wanted to respond to him and also add on his submissions. I do agree with him when he talks about the political question in Africa. in terms of governance systems in Africa. I do agree, if we are to achieve the growth and development in African member states, I do agree. And that's why we are here, to look at challenges. When he talked about the issue of employment opportunities, Comrade Kidega and colleagues here, as we are here, many African young people are trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea and Red Sea. Some of them will not come back. Some of them will come back when they are dead. They are going to Europe to look for a living. As we celebrate this day, is the time that we have to look at the new scramble for Africa that has made young people vulnerable to run to Europe. When I talk about the new scramble for Africa, I'm talking about the energy and the power being brought by China and other Asian countries who have come with a different ideology of scramble, of benefiting from Africa. So we have to discuss in detail the new scramble for Africa.
Okay,
We had forgotten the issue of education.
no, just before we get there, there's something I want to explore with Winnie first, because that is a bit of a broad-based conversation that we shall get to eventually. Yeah, Winnie, I want to shift gears to you. And have you for a second imagined the possibility of Africa, that this continent, with all that it has so much potential? For example, if the Igma Dam in DRC Congo was to be up and running, it has capacity to generate hydropower for almost the entire sub-Saharan Africa. You look at the resources, the minerals still in Congo, if well exploited, could be of tremendous benefit to the continent. You look at Africa's potential in terms of agriculture, the arable land that we have in this country, in this continent, the good climate that we have. I don't know, isn't Africa too endowed? And someone has said that if Africa is a gun, then Congo is the trigger. So do you think that if Africa focused on stabilizing, for example, Congo, the potential of Congo, the timber and all those things has potential to mushroom itself to benefit the continent at large? But the broader question here is that, is Africa too rich to be successful? I don't, because at times if you have too much, at times you
don't know what to use it for.
So is Africa too endowed in terms of natural resources for it to be, I don't know,
And
the potential?
And the same Africa has its systems paralyzed because grain cannot move from Ukraine to Africa despite the wealth of the resources.
Yeah.
And it's still sustaining ourselves.
Yeah, good context, yes.
Yeah, definitely. The truth be told is Africa is rich and it has all the capacity it can. And what we only need to look at is basically the political will and the structures that Julius earlier spoke of. Because given the context of the kind of the climate that you mentioned, the minerals and all that kind of sort, I think the only thing that is kind of putting us back in terms of rising is the context that we want to depend a lot on the Western world and think that we can't really do much. Not maybe because we don't really have the, should I say, the mechanized approach, like the kind of infrastructure that would allow us to kind of like maximize the productions that we do in this country. That's why you see a lot of exports that are going out of the country are basically raw, which in the end come back to the country, to the countries in Africa when they're actually processed and actually being highly like processed and as well as very expensive. I think that only takes us to the context of what our leaders in Africa are doing and also the political will in terms of collaboration, if African leaders could actually come and work together. I know there's a platform called the African Union where it brings all the African heads of states together, but I know there's always a bit of clashing. For example, what recently happened in Rwanda, where the border was cut off between Uganda and Rwanda. Then also a scenario where what's currently happening in DRC, Congo, and how its people are running to Uganda. At some point, you realize that Uganda is harboring the refugees that are coming from there. But then, is it possible that in case Uganda is hit at some point by maybe a civil war or a genocide or something, can the neighboring countries harbor the citizens of Africa, of Uganda? Sorry, not Africa. So it's more of like, are the leaders, the African leaders, ready and willing to collaborate? Because there is no way Africa can really push forth unless there's that bit of a holistic collaboration between the African states. If you're to see, especially like the just concluded UNGA conversations that happened in New York, realize that African nations went there. They sent delegates, but every African country went with its delegation, and the delegations had their own, how can I call it?
Delegates.
Yeah, they had their own delegates and they had their own agendas. Sometimes, a case you also see that the agendas don't align with maybe a particular country. For example, the countries that are from the ESC regions. At least the fact that you're going for that big global entity would have gone as an East African community and presented a paper or like maybe a submission that would grow the East African community. But then the fact that we do not, I don't want to say we do not believe in the power of collaboration or supporting each other, you realize that everyone went with their own agenda. And that really doesn't maximize the output, the outcome of what those meetings would have actually upholded for the countries or for the communities. But then if we were to see in terms of looking at the regions, for example, the East African community, the SADC region and the West African region, we realize that the SADC region at some point, they're somehow thriving when it comes to the different strings in terms of exporting stuff out of the countries within the SADC region. Just basically because the community itself is trying as much as possible to collaborate, unlike when it comes to the East African region where we're not collaborating. But then if we were to look further and see in terms of the notion that was instilled by, I don't want to call it the colonial time, but the notion that was instilled decades and decades ago when it comes to the African context, there's already a mindset that Africa cannot thrive without the West. And that's a mentality that our current generation, we the youth today, actually are thriving on and saying we cannot thrive within our country's context, within our continent's context. But you can only thrive when we go across the continent and go to the Western world, because of the exposure, the digitalized, like everything out there looks really so simplified. But then if we were to look at the fact that as African countries, we were to try and invest in our systems. The systems, I mean the education systems. You've seen some of the best universities are here in Nairobi. But then you'll see someone is choosing to rush the other side just because of the colonial mindset and say, the other side is much better. Someone who studies the other side has a better degree than someone who studied like maybe in Makerere or Egerton or anything of the sort. But then if we were to try and strengthen our systems in terms of education in Africa and give the young people, the African youths whom we're celebrating today, the mindset that they can thrive within the systems, the structures, and also apprehend the apprenticeship practices that used to happen those days, where a young person is taken up by maybe, I don't want to call it a godfather. Okay, let's just call it a godfather. Someone who already has an established entity. Let's give an example, a scenario of Tony Elemule under his foundation, where he's now nurturing young people in the business perspective, rather than young people running into other fellowships in the other Western world. So that context of that fellowship gives these young people the mindset that they're able to leverage on the resources within their country's context, and then just bring up a platform where they collaborate and engage and leverage on the knowledge of other fellow African youths within the continent. Now, the ideas they build there, those are ideas that actually help them build and synergize on the potentials that the young people in the continent have. So if the leaders would actually adopt that and try and leverage and actually support the young people to grow and actually grow in terms of, for example, giving them the opportunities, like, for example, leveraging on the SME system. I don't want to really go deep into that, especially when it comes to the young people who are in the SMEs, the sector in the country, because we already spoke of the double taxations. You realize that young people who are starting up businesses here in Uganda are actually taxed. You've just started your business. You're trying to see how best you can rule out unemployment in your life or support the rest of the young people by creating employment for them. And you've just started, but then the taxes that are being dropped on you actually kills your franchise or your establishment, your baby before it actually starts working. But then I'm just saying, if the governments would actually thrive on investing in these small businesses that these young people start, given the fact that it actually gives them the opportunity to actually improve on the kind of resources that the country has. For example, the coffee, that's the tech that say the young people were actually locally processing it here in Mbali, in Ginger. So why can't we invest and give these guys the opportunity, like give them the opportunity to try and actually build the products that they're doing, rather than the government sending it off at a low flat rate and then it returns at a very expensive rate. But then away from that, as what my two colleagues spoke of in terms of the scramble and partition of Africa, I know these things, yes, that is supposed to happen, but I just would really not request, but this is my perspective. I'd really say, let's look at everything that has happened before as something that is already done. But then we can't continue dwelling on what happened then and continue with the mindset that in the future, we're already the future as the young people currently. We're already living the future. That's why it's important that we as the young people rise up now and start leveraging on the opportunities that we have, collaborate with young people from the different countries within Africa and see how best you can support each other. Because there is no way we shall go forth if we continue screaming and crying about we were colonized, they brought the Western entity thing, but then what are we doing as the young people to create the future we want? However much we celebrate today, this day as the African youth, let us use it as an opportunity for us to reflect on what our elders did then, the wrongs they did then, the positives they did then, and then leverage on how best we can come up with possible ways, solutions to actually correct or maybe bringing something new or set up a pace that the future, because I know most of us already in the birthing, like in the age giving brackets. People are giving birth to kids, I'm sure, like let's say the average young person in Uganda who is like maybe 17, 18 already has a kid. So what future are you creating for you as a young person who's already 18 for the kids you're birthing? Because we can't keep on with the perspective that they'll also come back and say, we were colonized. That conversation needs to end. We need to create a way forward because we can't continue having these conversations. Last year, the African Youth Day theme was around investing in young people. Yes, investment has been done. I can't say it has been 100% done. Government leaders have gone to these global forums and made commitments of investing in health, investing in education. And then there comes the young people who are the front line of promoting different projects, the 1 million project, the SDG project. You're the ones on the limelight, the forefront of all these. But then how are we going to go forward unless we create or come up with conversations on reflections, as well as offering solutions and then coming up with strategic way forwards that could actually help in growing and boosting Africa? Because the truth is, we have the power to thrive as a continent without leveraging or maybe sourcing people from out. That's why you actually see most of those European, the American countries are actually sourcing the potential young people from Africa because of the mindset, the skills you have. Because the challenges you have in Africa actually...
Do you have skills or you have energy?
No, you actually have both. Yeah, look at the kind of the climb,
because of your energy and your strength. But I hear you. You make very good points, and I had to shift a bit to Laban because you mentioned something to do with for how long shall we continue blaming the colonial powers, all right? Laban, what are some of those factors that are international in nature that have been a stumbling block towards the empowerment of the ordinary African person? Because you may want to think about things like the Bretton Woods consensus that created the global financial institutions like World Bank and IMF. That was a consensus of mainly the Western powers, but that has for centuries and decades influenced the global financial outlook. All right? You may want to look at later on, because these institutions became conduits through which the Western powers get financial or economic grip over Africa. Because you mentioned the new partition,
The new scramble.
the new scramble and partition, which is now indirect. It is being done through institutions,
The funding.
like
Through loan grants.
through loans and through institutions and things like that. So I don't know, what are some of those factors that are global in nature that you think are influencing Africa's development? That is one. Two is that, because if look at the African Union. African Union is funded by European countries.
I know.
That is one. It is allegedly said that the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa was constructed.
By the West.
I don't have.
That's why I said it is alleged. So you look at Africa, even when we want to be independent, are we taking the right path towards more so economic independence?
And that's why I was so you see when I talked about the new scramble for Africa, it has a lot, both political, social, and economic. Gone are the days the scramble and the petition for Africa was different from the one we have today. The scramble for Africa was mostly by European countries who came through education and other things. But today we are looking at Asian countries who will come with a lot of monetary rewards, grants, to scramble Africa. And that has been one of the major challenges that has hindered the development and growth of African countries. When you look at, for example, I told you the story in Uganda is not different from other African countries, majority of them.
Yep.
We have modern slavery today, as I told. Many young girls, at night they will be at the entire international airport, going to Oman, to Asian country, majority of them. Labor externalization has been a challenge for the growth of African continent, majority of African countries. Then also, one of the issues we have to look at, even as we celebrate the African Youth Day today, the African countries' foreign policy. That has been the major challenge that has hindered the growth and development of African countries. And that foreign policy will not only affect the present generation, but also the next generation of African leaders. And who are the young people? The foreign policy, majority in African countries, is an individual policy, not for the entire country. That you have one president here in African continent who takes the country's foreign policy in his hand. He decides on what to do for his political interests. So that is one of the issues. You know recently how the World Bank decided to review its portfolio in Uganda and even in other countries, other African countries. You know that. But I was happy to see, was it Morocco over Algeria, over Tunisia, one of the countries, that for them, when the World Bank decided to give them a grant, they chased it. They said, you know what? Because there are African countries now who are exceptional. That you know what? But you know what is the reason? It's because of their foreign policy. They have good foreign policy. But now, when the World Bank reviewed its portfolio in Uganda in terms of extending foreign aid and grants to Uganda, you know how now what is happening. It is upon us, the young people, the next generation of African leaders, to get interested in what is our foreign policy in terms of economical, social, and political. Because it will not affect us today, but even in the future. Look, I will end by talking. I cannot come here on the civic space and I fail to talk about the education. Because I believe that the development of African countries will depend on how the young people are educated. We have to look at the enrollment in different countries. I told you in Africa, in Uganda, it's not different from other countries. Today, in Uganda, 8.8 million of the young people are enrolled in primary. But when you go to secondary, 834,000 are enrolled in secondary. But we have 117,000 enrolled in tertiary institution. There is that big gap. What does the African Youth Day Charter talks about in terms of empowering the young people to make sure that they have access to quality education? This is a very big issue we have to look. Because if you have 8.8 young people enrolled in primary, but almost more than a half cannot proceed to finish secondary, and then you have only 117,000 enrolled in institutions of higher learning, are we really giving people education in Uganda based on knowledge, values, and skills to make sure that they prosper in the future? Or we are just giving them notes just to have a document that you know what, this one passed through Victoria University and has a document. So it is upon us to look at the education we are giving to young people. Is this sustainable in terms of achieving the sustainable development in African countries? I am happy he talked about the political. It is us now to look at how do we build peace across the African continent. If you talked about the African Union, which is funded by European Union, even European Union by now, it funds African Union. But you have a conflict in Africa. You have a conflict in Africa. But the African Union cannot sometimes makes a resolution which is contrary to the agreements that these countries made. That they sit and make a resolution to make the young people in Africa suffer. You see what is happening. That African countries in West Africa, Burkina Faso, Gabon, made a resolution, but also African Union is making another resolution. You see Nigeria is cutting off power to Niger. Yet we have to be with the concession. So on this day, it's the time we have to come up and say, what is happening in Somalia? What is happening in Congo? Because it is the young people of Africa that are suffering. We have to advocate for political stability in Africa if we are to achieve. We have to also to look at the African's agenda of 2063. What does it talk about? What is happening today? And how can we make sure that we achieve that agenda? Thank you.
Interesting.
Can I just add something? I feel we've really left out when it comes to the African youth. I don't know if we've actually observed the number of innovations that are rising among young people in Africa. And then if we're to literally look at the conversations around maximizing innovations, how we can leverage on the different creativeness that young people in Africa have. But then if you also have conversations around internet governance and policies, because I believe it's a very key instrumental thing that affects all the aspects of development when it comes to Africa, with cross-cuts, be it education, because education is now going digital. Politics is also going digital. Like literally, agriculture is also now embracing a bit of technology. But then when what are the conversations and the loopholes that we as young people need to, as we are celebrating this day, is to also try and look at conversations around policies, what our governments can do when it comes to internet governance. How can they protect the young people's initiatives? How can they protect the young people who are using internet or different technology medium platforms to get information, to boost their political will, their participation and everything? Because as the world continues growing, technology is also advancing, and we need to really appreciate the power that it's actually giving to the young people as we wait the way forward for development. And I believe, however much there is the thought that Africa cannot stand on its own, I believe if the different African states and the different bodies and the communities within Africa decide to invest in the different young people, just like yesterday, there was a lot of praises going to the Kenyan young people who won something on innovations, and also 2 weeks ago, a group of 3 Ugandan youths actually won an innovation around health. So what does that take for the governments that these young people come from? Is there a way that the governments can start investing in this? Because I believe for development to actually kick off in any country or region or a continent, it's somehow embedded in technology, the advancement in technology, however much also the political will also comes in. So what can the government do in order for them to invest in innovations and creativeness of young people in Africa? Because that's the only way that we can actually develop and grow Africa, because there's potential. Young people are very innovative, very creative, and that's the reason why majority of them are not finding where they can actually put to use the skills that they have. That's why I see very many young people running out to the Western world. So Africa also has the will and the power to develop if only we invest in the creativeness and innovations that young people are coming up with in Africa.
Without not forgetting the governance.
Yeah, the
system.
policies, the laws.
Because the issue of governance is
very,
very vital.
Okay, I have to get to Julius. Julius, to me, 2 things. One is that the African Union Charter mentions, I think Article 26 talks about preserving Africa's culture and heritage. I want to believe that the African Youth Charter is a subordinate of the African Union Charter. So, because with our culture and diversity comes, with our culture comes diversity, and that is, I think, what makes us a unique continent.
Yeah.
Our, diverse culture that could, in fact, be a potential source of tourism. All right. So, but then with the current reality where we're talking about gay rights, we're talking about, rights of, same-sex marriage, rights to abortion, and all these things, is Africa's culture being eroded gradually? That is one. 2 is you spoke about the political question. Do you think Africa should begin to have the conversation of how do we re-engineer our own form of democracy? Because as it stands today, most African continents have adopted the Western democracy. Or every 5 years, let's go have elections, or let's have a parliament, or let's have this. Have you ever imagined a different way through Africa can govern itself? That is not exactly the Westminster way.
Thank you so much. Maybe, I don't know if you could permit me to react
Sure.
to the narrative from them before I can transition
The floor is yours.
into the issues that you have raised. My colleagues seem to assert that, yes, there is some gain that we have registered, and we should settle on the occasion of this important day to celebrate that. She talks about a few gains in hospitals and health sector. He talks about his general narrative, which is broad in nature. And I am a bit uncomfortable. My conscience is a bit uncomfortable with the state in which we seem to settle. I always ask myself one question: why should I settle for popcorns when the rest of the majority are taking home bread and iced cake? Why? Why, in the broader spectrum of issues across the globe, where we have nations training the youth in artificial intelligence, where we have countries advancing the talent, the skills of the young people in computer programming and engineering, why should I settle for a school where the government has simply supplied white chalk and a piece of board that is made out of wood? And why should I celebrate that in the 21st century? Why should I? And to me, this is at the center of the narrative that should guide discourse this morning. Why? You asked the number of things that are letting Africa down globally. And he omitted the structure of the UN Security Council system. That Africa, with all the over 50 countries united together, they have no slot on the UN Security Council. But you know, the UN Security Council is the nerve center of the global system. Yes, there is UN as a political organization. There is the UN General Assembly and several other organs under it. But the nerve center of the global system is hinged on security and how the world is governed. And that is the UN Security Council. And Africa has no space there.
I think Uganda last had in 2009.
Please, I mean the permanent representation.
The permanent representatives, there are only 5. 5 or 7?
No, they don't
There
have.
are 5. The 5 victors in the Second World War.
The permanent ones. The
That's why I
rest
talk
people.
So this is where imbalance and discrimination starts from against Africa. And then she brings in the narrative of Africa in global trade. Where is Africa registering the gains that you're talking about? If one, for example, we have this entire global political architecture crafted along the lines of inequality and discrimination, as elucidated in the UN Security Council, descend down into a system that comes into Africa where alliances are created. And you have a leader in Africa that appears to be a yes man to the African policies. And this leader, through manipulation of the masses, through the use of Bretton Woods institutions, this leader is held into a position of enslavement by giving him a lot of loans. And he cannot now raise his tongue against them. This is where we are. This is where Uganda is. We need around 2 years of no budget at all to be able to narrow down our international debt obligations.
Only 2 years. Oh yeah, and we are at
Of
80
no
trillion now.
budget.
Yeah.
We need to cease our internal activities to concentrate only on international
Reserve, debt reserve.
to service this debt. And you understand, you brought in softly the issue of democracy, and I'll handle it along those lines. So you have now this leader that cannot raise his tongue, and all he does is, one, UK will say, enter into this agreement so that we don't click on the red button of the loans. We shall reschedule the loan. A double taxation trade agreement is signed. We are in a position of enslavement. And she seemed to say that we should not cry. No, I disagree. We need to cry. We need to cry, not a cry of shedding tears,
You must
but
have
sitting
respect.
back into the boardrooms and reflect on how, as youths, we must participate in the manner in which Africa is governed. That's the starting point. And so we must walk out of this boardroom. We must meet our other colleagues and encourage them to participate in the governance of this country. And when we talk about governance, we don't mean the governance of lying around a political leader and seeking to have a peanut payment. And we walk home with a goat and we say, me, I'm a youth leader. I have taken home a goat. I have taken home a cow. And so that's governance. No. We mean
Systems.
policy making. How much is our input in shaping policies? How much is our democracy, Western democracy works? The only danger is that this democracy is being manipulated by the African leaders in liaison with the Western kleptocrats. So they know, yes, there is a yes man that is stationed in Burundi. There is a yes man that is stationed in Dakar. There is a yes man that is stationed in Niger. So this yes man shall always be defended. We shall send election observers. Their reports shall be edited by us. We shall fund his military activities. We shall fund his domestic affairs. In return, he will give us minerals. That's the soft scramble and the partition of Africa that I talked about. I didn't talk about the scramble of Africa that happened in 12th century. I talk about the partition of Africa that is rendering the African youth obtain a half-baked education system that is centered on British Columbia forestry, and yet we cannot assess the problems that Mavira Forest Reserve is facing. That's the kind of scramble and partition of Africa that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the scramble and partition of Africa, where an African cannot descend onto a wetland and plant rice, but a Chinese company will descend into an entire wetland, cut it down, and cultivate rice, and none of our leaders speak out. That's the form of scramble and partition of Africa that I'm talking about. And yes, my concerns are justified. They are concerns that are based on discriminatory policies that are meant to isolate the people of Africa, the youth, and render them powerless. And the powerless people are easy to govern. They will not raise political questions before our leaders. And in the end, we will have a generation of yes men. The current generation of yes men, yes youths who are only interested in egocentric needs. The needs of a chapati, the needs of a commando, the needs of lunch and supper, but without thinking about sustainable ventures like employment, sustainable ventures like investment, sustainable ventures like taxation policies. That you have a company that originates from the West. It comes here, ventures into oil, ventures into mineral exploration. It has a taxation holiday of 5 years. You have the same company started by an ordinary Ugandan here. It is taxed before it is registered. That's the scramble and partition of Africa that I'm talking about. So who is influencing these policies? They are influenced by the global multinational institutions and companies. Multilateral institutions and companies. They come here. You saw what happened in Nigeria in the period of Selo Wiwa. This is where Shell had allied with Sani Abacha in Nigeria. So they exploited oil. In the exploration of oil, they were damaging the environment. The people of Ogoni community rose up and questioned the operations of Shell. But Shell, using its huge resource envelope, was able to influence the government of San Abacha. So San Abacha descended on the ordinary people and crushed their heads. Selo Wiwa that I'm talking about was executed in broad daylight because he was an activist sabotaging the activities of Shell. This is how Africa has been governed to this day. Descend down and see who is funding our Alberta oil pipeline. It's the Chinese. Now, I have been exposed to the manner in which projects are financed. The worst mode of project finance is by China. Has no concern for human rights. You see, the initial funders had withdrawn simply because they were concerns to do with environmental sustainability. China comes in and says, hey, where the rest have taken off, for me, I'm here. I don't care about the sustainability of Africa. I don't care about the rights of the people around the pipeline. I don't care the survival of Africa. So long as Uganda is willing to pay interest, money is injected in. But ask yourself, how much is the interest? Get into the Entebbe Express Highway and see how much is the interest on that project. Read the terms of that particular agreement and understand what we mean by the scramble and partition of Africa. So when you use a vehicle from here to Entebbe using that road, you are part of the scrambled and partitioned Africans because you're sending your money directly to Beijing. This is what we are talking about. A day-to-day ongoing concern that affects the people. But if this resource envelope was invested in the welfare of the young people, the young engineers, the young economists like him are empowered to start projects, engineering programs. They could construct that road, I am sure. There is nothing unique about it that we needed to have China come over, construct it on a tenure of over 35 years. That's the scramble and partition of Africa. You ask yourself how many vehicles are using that particular road on a daily basis. It's not the only project that is operating in the same Medesopolandi. There are several many other projects that we cannot talk about. So moving forward, the Western democracy, like you did ask, could be the best blueprint for Africa to follow. But it has its own shortfalls. The first issue is, have the African leaders really followed this democracy? Have we had elections in Africa that fit this kind of democracy that we are talking about? So you have leaders manipulate people who have been disempowered, like the way youths are disempowered. And then after manipulating them, they are in control of the electoral systems. The electoral commissioner is your son, because we did mention that you have no access to an opportunity if you don't have a godfather. And this son is meant to render you to have lost the election. Is that possible? The starting point for us as an African people to have democracy is to open career to merit. That we have opportunities that are based on competence. This is what Napoleon Bonaparte based on to build the French society after the collapse of the Bourbon regime. This is exactly what was used in Singapore by Lee Kuan Yew to transform Singapore. Career-based approach. Merit-based approach. Let the best doctor of all the doctors become the leader of the doctors. Show them the way. Here, let the closest daughter who has stepped into a medical school become the leader of all the doctors. Despite the level of inadequacy that this doctor has in Uganda, this is going to be the leader of all the doctors. And tell me where is going to be transformation. So we must open career to merit, talent-based. That you walk into State House and get there and you become a presidential secretary. And the president does not know your father, the president does not know your mother. You are there simply because you have the inner competency to operate the computer, to manage the system, to report in an effective and in a bona fide manner. And so you deserve to become a leader at that capacity. Let us see the State House advertise the scholarships that we have all over the country. But you have an embassy announce a scholarship, a son and a granddaughter to someone is picked and sent to Beijing. The best student at Makerere University is awarded the best degree and sent back to the village. America, meanwhile, is fishing into other countries to get who is the best qualified person and is given a green visa to go and become a United States citizen. In 20 years, you have an America that is advancing industrially, militarily, and economically, in governance, in all spheres, because for them it is merit that works. And so this talent is nurtured. These young people grow up knowing that I must compete to be the best in my country. And that's where bread comes from. But here, you have fate predefined. You know you will never become a governor because you don't have anyone in government. But you're the best economist. And so the governor that is coming because he's linked to someone is not going to work for the transformation of the economy. He's going to run what we call an appeasement policy. And this is where we are, jumbled systems. How then do you start speaking about the rights of the youth? No, just tell me, don't breathe hard. No, really. Tell me. You see,
our time is fast spent, but again, it was very hard to stop you because you were, taking the point home one by one. So it was hard to stop you, but my sigh is in agreement with what you're saying. So I'm not excelling in sort of a disagreement, but I'm in agreement of what you're saying. Well, I don't know. I couldn't have asked for a better panel.
Funny way to end.
All of you guys have been spot on, extremely spot on. You've driven the point home, and I don't know. Any viewer who has listened to this show must be amazed at the quality of the youth out there. Well, we need to put this conversation to bed, and I will give us just 1 minute because I'm being signaled that we need to get out of here. 1 minute each to give us your parting shots. I don't know. What way for African youth? Laban, I'll begin with you. Winnie, then I end with Julius.
Yeah, thank you. One, I will first make a question.
To who?
Then all of you, and even to young people listening, is the next generation of African youth leaders ready, determined, prepared to take Africa to the next level? That should be the question. There is also one thing I've noted that I want to speak on this civic space, that he talked about, I'm concluding, he talked about the discrimination of young people. I want to say that most people in these spaces, even when you are qualified, we have been discriminated. It is very hard for people like us to be permitted to get opportunities in the government entities, international organizations, because of what we submit and what we write in our different socials. I want to take in this perspective, not as a moderator here, but as a member of the National Youth Council Executive Committee, that you should fight for that discrimination. Otherwise, you are
fight against
that discrimination,
not for
of denying young people who are in these places opportunities, because the trend will go on, and a few days to come you will not have people to talk because of fear to lose opportunities. Otherwise, I will end with 2 words as we celebrate the African Youth Day. One it is in Zulu, one is in Kiswahili. In Zulu, I will end with the word Kosisikelele Africa. And in Kiswahili, I will say Mungu ibariki Africa. Thank you for hosting me today. It's a great pleasure.
And I say to you, asanteni sana. Yes.
I think mine is just more of like a statement to the young people. Much as we're celebrating the day today, I would just urge to continue speaking up, and also continue being keen about the different issues that come up, as well as ensure that your voices are always heard, as well as also be bold enough to take up the platforms and the opportunities that come your way that will actually create space for you to be able to speak and also be instrumental enough in making decisions, as well as being part of the solutions, designing solutions that could actually help us in addressing some of these issues that we as the young people of Africa, the African youths, go through. So that's all from me, and happy Africa Youth Day to all the young people in Africa. Thank you.
Yes, Julius, you have the floor.
I want to commence by appreciating and acknowledging the central role that is played by Civic Space to offer us the opportunity to interact and debate these policies. I want to thank you, in particular, the moderator, for considering me for this particular opportunity. And to all of you out there, today is not a day for us to celebrate. There is nothing much to celebrate. It's a day to get back on the drawing board, to think together the manner in which we shall influence the future of Africa. Thank you so much.
Wow, that by all means brings us to the end of this conversation. Like I said, this has been a thrilling conversation, and the African Youth Day is here for us to, contemplate about. And you've heard what I've said. Think about it, meditate, but above all, I believe that Africa is possible. Our future as a continent, whatever you've imagined of, is possible for as long as, we have the right mindset, the right energies being, at the seat of driving policy and making key decisions for us. Until next week, same time, same place, this is the Youth Roundtable, and have a lovely Wednesday. Bye-bye.